members today with me and advisory board members. Anybody else here? Shweta Sareen, please. Shweta Sareen, if you're here. I don't know where Shweta Sareen is. Yeah, if she's here, she could just come. Come. Jagdeep, please. Keki, Tamapan. Manish. Right. Thank you. आओ अशोक भाई आओ तब 40 सेकंड
आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपज्योतिर्परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपो हरतु मे पापम् सन्ध्यादीपनमोऽस्तुते
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm loud and clear. I'm going to cut out a lot of formalities. I don't want to introduce myself and bore you people, except that I'm a professional lawyer. I sit on a couple of boards. I am the president of Council for Fair Business Practices since the past 7 years. And I come very often on television for debates in the night. That's all. And yes, I have my master's from Georgetown University, and I'm a solicitor from London as well. But I think the reason why we are having this ethics summit is because we want to ensure that ethics are entrenched not only in the people who've registered for our event today, but also for the young generation. That's the reason why I'm very happy to have 50 students from Atlas University and 20 or so from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. A round of applause for all of them. Thank you very much for coming today, because you all are the vice presidents and the presidents and the AVPs and the general managers and the board corporate honchos of tomorrow. So I think if in a small way I'm able to entrench some semblance of ethics through the stalwarts that we have as our panelists, then I think I'll be very, very pleased that I've done my bit as the president of Council for Fair Business Practices. As you all know, that this organization was started in 1966 by J.R.D. Tata, Mr. Ramkrishna Bajaj, Mr. Soli Godrej, Mr. Ashok Birla, Mr. Harish Mahindra, Mr. Keshub Mahindra, and many others, with a whole view to ensure that fair practices are entrenched and ethics are engineered across the spectrum. They were the manufacturers. They decided that we don't need to smuggle gold. We don't need to have octroi. We need to abolish it. We cannot hoard tomatoes and onions. And that was the small sort of thing that they had in their mind at that time. And with that, they started the journey. And we are here today at the end of 59 years. And we are hosting various events like this, where we have people, and I'm very happy today to see a jam-packed room. Normally it's a little less because people flow in, flow out, but I try to ensure that why not bring students today? Because they're the ones, rather than me going to all the universities or all the colleges and trying to, that would be cumbersome, so might as well. So we'll start roping in people, and I would encourage JBIMS and Atlas students to contact their counterparts in other colleges, other universities, to ensure that they also get the advantage of seeing all of us talk and battle it out and try to see in what way we try to bring in ethics in myriad forms. The underlying theme, and because I am a lawyer, I'll tell you this, the underlying theme of anything that we have in this scenario, and the reason why we have these seminars and events, is because I firmly believe what what Martin Luther King said, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, that kind of an adage is something which I think a lot of people would believe in, a lot of people would agree with, and it's very simple to say that presence of peace is possibly absence of injustice. The answer is no. You have to ensure that justice is done. That is the real peace, and to ensure that justice is done, you might want to have even a Mahabharata. So, having said that, this is the legacy that we continue to have. I've got some of the most elite people on my advisory board, including people on my EC invitee chat group, who are social influencers, who are executive committee members, invitees, and member of the academia. And if you notice the advertisement that came out, 99% of them are part of CFBP. Manish Kejriwal is the only exclusion clause, because I've just started to get to know him. And Manish, I'm going to invite you to the advisory board as well. And you have only one option there. So, because it will be my privilege, my pleasure to have someone as brilliant, as knowledgeable, as eloquent, as vocal, as Manish, and you will see it, when he talks. And I'm going to, without further ado, I'm going to read out and invite each of them on stage, my panel one. I'll start with Mr. K.K. Mistry. I don't think this gentleman needs any introduction. With all full respect, to Mr. Deepak Parekh, if there is any person who's really taken HDFC to where it is today, that's Mr. K.K. Mistry. And you should see his interview with Shireen Bhan on CNBC TV 18. And you will see that, you just Google it, is about 51-minute interview where he talks about many things, including, what are his hobbies and things like that. You normally don't see that with KK. Please have a seat, because your resume is such and I have to do justice to all four. So, I'm going to cut it very short, but he's a chartered accountant from the ICAI, and he brings over 4 decades of experience in banking and financial services. He started with AF Ferguson, HUL and IHCL, and, he was inducted into the board as an executive director in HDFC in 1993, managing director in 2000, and vice chairman and CEO in 2010. And he is now a non-executive director of the board of HDFC Bank after the amalgamation of HDFC Limited and HDFC Bank. And other than that, he is instrumental in establishing HDFC Bank Limited, HDFC Asset Management Company Limited, HDFC Life Insurance Company, HDFC Ergo General Insurance. I don't know what is left of HDFC other than these things. So, obviously, and his board memberships. He's a director on the board of Tata Consultancy, Flipkart Private Limited, Singapore, the Great Eastern Shipping Company Limited, HDFC Capital Advisors, and Brookprop Management Services Private Limited. Apart from many advisory positions that he holds, I'm very, very happy and privileged to have you, Mr. Mistry. Please have a seat. Please take a seat. And now I'm going to go to Mr. Jagdeep Kapoor, who is our advisory board member as well, and who's the brand management guru, and who is a professor at Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. And yes, the applause is very palpable. I understand, जो दिखता है वो बिकता है, and that is the dictum that he's taught me. So, मैं दिखता हूँ, हमेशा दिखता हूँ, इसलिए मैं बिकता हूँ. So, he's established his company Samsika in 1995. Fruity, Appy, Synthol, you name it, and he's built the brands for these, sort of products. And he's a prolific writer, and has been published over 809 articles. He was the one who introduced me to Business India, where I've started regularly writing, and I obviously called Ashok Advani, who's about an octogenarian and a fellow barrister. I'm not a barrister, but I'm a solicitor from London. So I told him, and Mr. Advani knew me because he had seen me offer on TV. So I said, oh, that thing makes things easier, perhaps difficult at times, but he said, aap likh sakte ho? I said, haan, main try karunga. But, and then hopefully I think all my articles have been published thereafter. So I think he's realized that I can even even write. It's a very normal question for any publisher to ask you that, you could be a prolific speaker, but, when it comes to writing, you may not be able to write. And so Mr. Kapoor has been awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the World Brand Congress in 2024, and he was also awarded the prestigious Jamnalal Bajaj Uchit Vyavhar Puraskar, Fair Business Practices Award, in the year 2002. And I think he had to make quite an attempt for it, because the Jamnalal Bajaj Award, which is coming up next month at the IMC, is possibly one of the most prestigious awards in its 38th anniversary that we'll have. And it's got Abdul Kalam and, former Prime Ministers, Uday Kotak and several others, Arundhati Bhattacharya as our chief guest earlier, and Mr. Ravi Kant, who is the former managing director of TCS. So thank you, Mr. Kapoor, for joining us today. And now I shall have Manisha Girotra come up on stage. Manisha Girotra is our advisory board member once again. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Moelis in India. Moelis is a US-based, New York headquartered company, and she was previously the chairperson and country head for UBS in India, with a career spanning 33 years with UBS in London, Hong Kong, Mumbai, Delhi. She has bootstrapped both these organizations in India, setting up the teams, obtaining necessary regulatory licenses, and building the brand. She is the youngest CEO of a global investment bank in India at the age of 32. She has advised over $500 billion of mergers and acquisitions and equity and debt fundraisings. And she is also on the global board of Naspers and Prosus, a US-based $200 billion market cap technology investor, and Mindspace Business Park REIT and Sona Comstar. She is also on the board of Central Square Foundation, Neurology Foundation in Asia Society. Her contributions have been widely recognized through industry accolades, and she's been named as one of the 50 women to watch by the Wall Street Journal, and the top 50 women in business by Forbes and Fortune, and the top 25 most powerful women in business in India by Business Today. She's graduated in economics from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and was awarded the Dr. Manmohan Singh Gold Medal for Academic Excellence for Master's degree from the Delhi School of Economics. So I think we've got a fantastic academician here in Manisha, and I would like to acknowledge her thanks, because some of the panels that I set even earlier and today are thanks to her, because she has just several numbers on a Rolodex, boom, 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 she just sends me 6, 7, 8 and say, okay, I'll leave it to you, give my reference. So thank you, Manisha, for helping me out. It's a pleasure to have people like you. People say that the president is a great president, a visionary. He's been there since 7 years. He's leading the fort. He's running. Sorry, I don't run unless the people along with me run that mile along with me. So it doesn't happen. The president cannot achieve milestones without the people like the ones who are standing on my podium and several others who are sitting here, backing me up. Now, let me read the final introduction. And friends, this is an introduction to read or to listen to. And it's a pleasure listening to this. I mean, when I read it this first time, I was, and I thought to myself that I was smart. I realized, sorry, Swapnil, you're not. This is what is smartness all about, apart from the three distinguished gentlemen and the lady here. Manish Kejriwal, please come up on stage. He's the managing partner and founder of Kedara Capital. It's a private equity firm pursuing control and minority investment opportunities in India and manages over $6 billion in assets under management. Kedara combines the strengths of a well-networked, highly experienced local investing and operating team with their experience of their strategic partner Clayton, Dubilier and Rice. It's a global private equity firm. Manish, in early 2004, founded the India office of Temasek Holdings and as its country head led all the investments till 2011. And as a senior managing director of its leadership team in Singapore and a member of the senior management company, he was practically involved in building up the brand. Prior to Temasek, he was a partner at McKinsey & Company, Inc. and was part of their New York, Cleveland, and Mumbai offices. He helped found the private equity practice, and prior to McKinsey, he had worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. and Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong. Now, I'll tell you why this happens. This is the reason why all of these big companies recruit you is because you have a BA, an undergrad from Dartmouth College with magna cum laude, received the Dean's Plate, and he also holds an MBA from Harvard University where he was a Baker Scholar. So you've got 2 Ivy Leagues on your resume, and then you have all these distinguished, companies as on your resume as well. And he's also the lead independent director at Bharti Airtel, and continues his ongoing involvement in the United World College movement as a founder trustee at Ashoka University and a former member of the Harvard Alumni Board. So I guess that was the introduction. Please, now I will join myself as a moderator, and, I'll try to see what questions I can ask, to all this very, very distinguished panel that I have put together. I hope you all enjoy it.
Just one correction.
Please.
Manisha is wonderful. She's not 32 anymore.
I know, absolutely. And she was the youngest youngest CEO. That's what you had mentioned. So, well, I think the spirit is still...
It's 28.
Absolutely. So you saw right there. But it's going to be a very interesting panel, and I'll start with Mr. K.K. Mistry.
The reason I sat in the middle was because I thought you'd start either here or there. That's why I sat.
No, I'll go by the order of seniority, because for me both of you are senior, but I think I'll Jagdeep is more like my...
When you say senior, you mean senior by age.
Whatever. I don't want to sort of elaborate on that, but anyway, now KK, HDFC as a brand. It's not a very tricky question, but how do you think it can distinguish itself from the other banking brands that we have? And why do you think is ethics, or has that been at the core? Because from whatever interviews I've seen of you, I think there is a lot of emphasis of yours on the culture and ethics. So if you could please elaborate for the audience.
So I'll talk more about HDFC Limited rather than HDFC Bank.
Right.
So when we started the HDFC brand, we said the most important thing to do is to create a brand which people trust. I think the most important thing in any business is trust. Trust of your stakeholders. Stakeholders could be your employees, it could be your shareholders, it could be your customers, it could be your suppliers, it could be your agents, whoever. So creating trust and not doing anything which would cause, and that was a mantra which H.T. Parekh, who was a founder of HDFC, always used to say, can never do anything which would cause you the slightest degree of embarrassment if it was reported in the newspaper the next day in the morning. And the other phrase which we often used to talk about in HDFC was that there is no pillow or there is no cushion as soft as a clear conscience. So keep that in mind. Ethics, very important. Culture, extremely important, but maybe we can talk about that along the way.
Absolutely. And I'll come to Jagdeep. Jagdeep, when you advise companies to build brands, and how difficult it is to tell them to, I would not use the word prioritization of social good, but also at the time of looking at social good along with shareholder profit. Because I think when you're trying to build a brand, that is something which you will want to make sure that the company takes care of both. Not necessarily from the corporate governance perspective.
It's a game of balance, and if you actually look at it, on one side you have a responsibility to build the brand. All brand building is to build a business, to serve consumers and to make a profit. But how do you do it? You could do it in the right way, in the wrong way. So when you've asked about social good versus the corporate profit, you can manage to balance both. For example, if you were to look at a brand like Amul, which there is an attempt being made to taint it, which is one of the most trusted brands, and the word trust is another synonym for the word brand. If you look at that 70,000 crore brand, Amul, which touches the lives of so many people, so it does social good also. You can have pure milk, whether to an elderly grandparent or to your kid, and all the products that are there. In the middle of COVID, when nothing else was available, Amul was always available. And it was available because it was needed by so many families. So when we are talking about social good, then the social good has to come from quality, which is obvious, from availability, which is not so obvious, and also has to come from desirability. Now the question is, if you're going to bring in desirability, are you crossing the line and inducing people to buy what they should not, or seducing people to buy what they don't need? No, that's not true. Consumers will make the final choice, and the most sensible person on the face of this earth is the consumer. If you actually go and see, and I will end by that, if you go to a supermarket or if you go to a Kirana store or even one of these D-Marts or Fresh and Pick or any of these places, the retailer tries to put close expiry dahi packs in front. They are going to be expired tomorrow, so that he can trick the consumer and the housewife can pick that up. But what does the housewife do? You go and observe it. The housewife takes those packs, moves it aside, goes behind, picks up the long shelf life. The housewife is smarter, the consumer is smarter than that. So whatever you may try, social good has to be part of your brand. Only then your brand will grow. Otherwise, you cannot play tricks. So at the end of the day, brand building, one is trust, the second is social good, and the third is perceived value. Value is quality versus price, but perceived value is the image of that brand, the perception of that brand, which is the intangible part. So tangible, intangible, social good plus corporate good can be balanced.
Got it. Manisha, I think Ken Moelis started Moelis in 2007, from what I understand. And I think within 1 year itself, it really scaled dizzy heights. And over a period of the last 19 years, you'll have about 19 offices to 20 offices across the globe. And you've, literally bootstrapped here in Mumbai, the entire works of Moelis. I call it aspirational branding. How do you balance aspirational branding? Because the growth is pretty meteoric in 19 years to have 19 offices and things like that. So do you really think that aspirational branding can at times become misleading? And how you think that the founders of your company ensure that we have our ethics rooted in place, we don't mislead, we don't get caught within the SEC net and things like that, for anything for that matter, because out there SEC is much stronger than SEBI out here and things like that, and you know what happens there. So how do you think that they manage that? Because when one looks at that growth of Moelis, it's extremely phenomenal. I mean, you must have had wizards there, and there's no denial about that. But I mean, I would tend to lose the way at times. I mean, if I were to be that aspirational, and which I think anybody would be, your hunger is there apparent. Because that happens even in law firms.
Well, thanks, Swapna. That's a very relevant question. So when my boss, the founder, Ken Moelis, who I think Keki and Manish both know well, set up Moelis, I think, look, he raised external capital, right? This business started with external capital. And at that point, to your, the point you mentioned, there is pressure, right? The investors want to see you make returns. And if you are going to make returns in the short term in businesses like ours, you can actually compromise on the kind of clients you align with. And Ken was absolutely clear. So for example, when I set up India, Ken said to me that for the first 2 years, I don't expect you to make money. It's fine. We'll subsidize you. The other geographies will subsidize you. If you make money working with clients such as Keki, such as HDFC. His name is at the door, right? It's Moelis and Company, and he's Ken Moelis. He absolutely does not want his name to be compromised. So I think that's the principle we followed, and we follow our KYC norms even today in terms of onboarding the clients that we do are so strict. I mean, in fact, a lot of the team gets frustrated because, we are out there hunting for business, you've got a big piece of business, it's a large fee event, and suddenly internal compliance clients will say, no, we found something on this person or this firm and we can't do business. And, it's as a hunter and as a leader, it is frustrating. But I think you have to always remember that a brand lives in the community. We live in the community. We are because of the community. We are for the community. So if you compromise that brand in the short term and make some short-term gains, in the long term, we are going to, especially a business like ours, which is service-oriented. We are not selling products. We are selling a service. We are selling our reputation. So I think if we keep that in mind, we absolutely will make sure that, we win in the long run. And that's why Mullis, in a very competitive world, has had so much success. Today, I think just on M&A and advisory, we make more fees than, let's say, a Deutsche or a Citi, etc., which is pretty remarkable. Aspirational branding, to your point, Swapnil, I mean, we all have to amplify our positives, right? When I go in and I pitch to a Keki or a Manish, I'm going to tell them what are my strengths, right? But so long as I am not giving any misleading facts, right? It is so long as I am not misguiding him on things that I can or cannot do, especially things I cannot do, I think I'm fine. If I have to win a piece of business over another firm and I have to compete, I have to amplify my strengths. But so long as I am not misguiding on my weaknesses, catering to certain vulnerable communities and sections and misguiding on that, I think we're fine. We're in the business of selling ourselves, and everyone has short attention spans. If I'm going to Keki to pitch for a piece of business, I probably have 35 minutes of his time, right? I mean, in 35 minutes, I have to say why he should choose me over Goldman Sachs, which he didn't, by the way, but that's let's leave that aside for now. Nothing personal, right? But yeah, I think so. I think aspirational branding is good so long as it's not misleading.
Great. Manish, when it comes to Kedara Capital, it's one of the most renowned investment banking company, and you have $6 billion assets under management. When you invest people's money in companies, do you look at the ethical portfolio of those companies, or apart from, of course, how successful they are in terms of their balance sheets and things like that, or does ethics tend to take, or their ethical considerations tend to take place, a secondary place when it comes to putting people's money in? How does Kedara, and how do you at the helm of affairs try to, and when you formed Kedara Capital along with two of your other members, did they have the same thought process that you did? So it's a double-edged, there are two questions in one question of mine, so I would appreciate if you could answer both.
First, Swapnil, thanks for having me. I would say, to answer your last question first, I don't think you need to discuss ethics if everything you do is ethical. So to us, a discussion on the topic, it's a bit like ESG. The discussion is irrelevant if that's the only way you know how to behave. And let me just then, with that as a context, say, Keki and I sit on a bunch of CI committees. I've always thought the ESG, the E in ESG should be ethics and not environment, especially in a Trumponian world where, again, now I'm joking, the environmental stuff. But to me, the basis of life, the basis of business is ethics. And if you are unethical, it can only be in the short term, because you will die or not be there. You can't have continued unethical behavior to any of your stakeholders, because your customers, your shareholders, or your employees, or any other stakeholders that buy your suppliers, if there's unethicality involved, they don't want to do business with you. Now, to your specific question, let me take it both, because you said investors and internal. Internal, it's very simple. Ethics comes from, I believe, humility. And the problem in our industry is people assume we're arrogant and obnoxious. And because you people, even employees, start believing we represent the number we keep throwing around. 6 billion doesn't matter. 6 billion will be zero if our investors see us not performing or we appear to be unethical. So for us, the single most important thing is to teach humility, and especially to our youngest guys, because that's then cultural, and the culture of the firm then builds according to that culture. And for us, the single phrase we have is obligation to dissent. So starting from the founders and partners, I really believe our youngest members of the team are the ones closest to the situation, the company, and they're evaluating a certain... So in a team meeting or even in an investment committee, which is where we make the final decision, they should drive the discussion, not the guys in the ivory tower who haven't actually been out in the field and seen the company in detail. And that, I will say, we live and breathe. We've borrowed that phrase, I must say, from McKinsey, but actually when I was in McKinsey, I didn't realize what it meant. Now I actually do. So that to me, and if there is internally even a slightest breach, you're out. I mean, there's no question. I mean, there's no negotiation. People know that. Now, the same thing applies for your investees. I can give you an example where we had spent, time for us is more important than capital. We'd spent more than 6 months on a company in Hyderabad. We'd gone through the entire, we loved the company. Everything around the industry, the company, the promoters seemed positive. Months, and so you're very keen then to deploy that capital and close it off. And month 6, 5.5, we noticed something which came out to us, which we hadn't, probably because of our lack of that, we hadn't seen it in the detailing. Of course, we didn't move ahead in that situation. I don't want to go through what it was. It doesn't matter. It was unethical. But what I was proudest about, I thought it's easy for me. I'm slightly removed from that investment. And I brought it up and I said, what do you guys think? You know, what should we do with it? There wasn't a negotiation. The team unilaterally, starting from the youngest one who had put the most time on it and wasn't aware of it, said we'll walk away. So for us to be associated with anyone unethical is also negative. And I think the beauty about India, and I think Manisha and Keki would agree, the levels of corporate governance stemming from ethics at least, which was a huge issue 3 decades ago.
Yes.
I'm not saying doodh ke dhule hue hain, but it's significantly better. And I would say the quality of our entrepreneurs are also understanding, the easiest way to be unethical is to, the usual game, in a different tax regime, over-invoicing, all those games. Today, the moment you do that, it reflects in a lower profitability, which lowers in a much lower market cap. So even if you're sensible, not unethical, you would still not do something unethical.
Absolutely. So basically what you're trying to say is there are very much, even though sitting on a high pedestal and running billion-dollar conglomerates, you're still very much at the mercy of that one consumer who can really take you to task for doing something unethical. So that little consumer also has that kind of a power.
And as I'm sure Mr. Kapoor will say, just the power of social media today. Let's say if we are mistreated on Indigo.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Put it out there, something will happen. You're not going to get it. You may not get it. I don't want to put them under the bus. I'm sure they're good and professional. But the power of social media has become so strong that you don't have a choice.
That was, as they call it, indie goof. So very much, something which could have well been avoided. Let me ask Keki this question. I think more often, Keki, we notice that there is selective storytelling. I will highlight my positives and, sort of downplaying my negatives and all of those things. Now, very academic question. And you can answer it from the perspective of the banks, you can answer it from the perspective of corporate governance, etc. Do you really think that is ethical or unethical? That I'm selectively storytelling, I'm trying to tell you that this is what I have, this is what I am, and these are all my positives which can be verified from my resume, but there are certain negatives which I have. I'm not talking from an individualist perspective, I'm talking from the perspective of, a company or anything. Do you think that when I've seen, I don't want to name the banks here because it's a public platform, but I've seen there is a lot of nonsense that goes on. And in fact, I was the one who had almost fallen a victim to that when something which was not recommended by a particular bank was recommended by that RM to me, only because that RM was in bed with that particular company. So I cross-checked and I found that,
some connection. Look, I think any brand has to be built around certain basic traits. There should be accuracy, there should be honesty, there should be ethics, and there should be transparency. Now, it doesn't mean that you go all over the place saying these are my positives and these are my negatives. I don't think anyone actually goes and says
Says my
these are my
negatives, yeah,
negatives. But in a one-on-one, it depends obviously on the product, it depends on the on the facts of the case. It's not necessary that you go and publicize your negatives, but at the same time, you don't overemphasize your strengths. You say what you can do, and if you were to give false promises, then you can never build a brand. And if you cannot build a brand, you will never get the trust of people. So all your stakeholders have to trust you. I again come back to this point of trust. According to me, that is the most important thing. And according to me, the reason why HDFC was successful all these years was because of the trust that our stakeholders had in us, which is why we traded at a premium to market all the time, and our lending rates were actually a little higher than anybody else, but it transparently put over there.
Fine. Jagdeep, when you advise brands like Fruity, Appy, Synthol, I mean, Synthol is part of Godrej, so I don't think we have to worry on that, but Fruity, Appy and the other brands which have been made very popular, when you advise them, did you actually look into the fact that the product that they were manufacturing, which was an edible consumption, which has to be edibly consumed, do you think that they followed the practices? Did you ensure that when you were building up the brand for them, you personally looked into the fact that whether they complied with all the parameters, the compliance specifics? Because I think that is something which, it's like a due diligence that we corporate lawyers do. That before we tell A to invest in B, we do the due diligence of B at the behest of A.
Yeah, let me answer this specifically in three parts. First part is there is a regulatory environment. There is the FSSAI, which basically has its own regulation. There is the environment wherein you clearly define if it is a 15% juice content, it's a drink. If it's a 25%, it's a nectar. If it's 100%, it's a juice. It's very well defined. So you are within that ambit, and that is one way of being true and not misleading. The second way of doing it is, and I would totally agree with Manish, is basically to keep your feet on the ground. The brand mantra we have, and to reinforce what he said, is be humble or you will tumble. The fact of the matter is that you have to be on the ground, and a small example which I will share with you, incidentally all these are registered trademarks. Okay, so
They are absolutely.
Thought of.
I mean, I've picked up that from, picked up a lot of these things from him. When I wrote about Alfonso mangoes, being faked in the Economic Times, and I met the editor and the op-ed editor, I told him that this arm is khas, by the way, and I also told him that, so he said, okay, I'll change that. He wrote that, and then the title that he gave was Alfonso's from Alphonies. Now,
Right. The second part of the example that you gave of fruit drink or fruity, or as director of Parle, is my responsibility that the right thing is done. So the second thing is where you give enhanced perceived value. For example, I was working in the Hyderabad market. Every Saturday, of course, here I am with you. After this, I'm going to the market. I do 40 outlets because that is the best way you come to know what is happening in the ground level. So in Hyderabad market, there was a school bus which had come, and that school bus had a lot of young children, and there was a guy who was selling fruity with a bucket and ice and fruity, and he was giving the packs. And we had just launched it a couple of years ago, and then he was taking out from his pocket, his hands were dirty, nails you could see, and he was pulling out a straw and giving it to everyone. So that point of time one realized that there is something missing, because such an hygienic pack, such crores worth of investment in the machinery, Tetra Pak, and the final straw which he is going to consume with is being given by that. So I got back and said we'll have to make that investment, and crores of investment was made with straw applicators, and since then Fruity comes along with the straw attached, which you will open up, and so even that is part of it in terms of making sure that the integrity of the brand and the final consumer has it in the purest manner. The third part, which is the most important part, is the intangible part. You are good, that's 50%. You need to be seen to be good. That is the remaining 50%. You are good is what you're doing internally. Being seen to be good, you're making the consumer make the right choice. If you have the best product and you're being secretive about it, silent about it, and not marketing it, and not telling your good points, then you are actually doing something wrong. I'm not saying say more than what you are. I'm not saying say less than what you are, but at least say what you are. So from that perspective, the transparency. So there are three ways of doing it.
Understood.
And we believe whether the brand is Fruity or whether the brand is Fevicol or it's a service brand. One has to go through it. I'm in the service industry. I run a consultancy firm for 30 years, the first brand marketing consultancy. There's one thing which we follow. We don't take a conflict of interest client. So for every one client I lose 6 to 7 clients. I don't take a conflict of interest client since 30 years. So I must have lost much more than what I earned. So a lot of people say you're stupid. Why don't you do it under subsidiary? Why don't you do it? But that's what, if Monjani is my client, Navneet is my client, they have faith that I am not going to disclose what they're sharing with me in confidence.
That would amount to subsidizing your ethics
Yeah,
if you do it as a subsidiary.
There are certain things which have to be done. Like for example, there was a case and the company and the subsidiary got sold. Of course, it went public. Where you're selling an ice cream, which is actually not an ice cream. It has got vanaspati in it. Okay, and it's frozen dessert with the way you're selling it. Then the real one comes out and says, "Hey, ice cream is made of milk, and does that have milk?" So it takes a minute for a kid also to come to know that this is not got milk. So he's going to reject it. So years together of hundreds of crores of advertising going to go waste because you told a lie. And now it's up for sale or sold and now a separate demerger or whatever. So it's very, very important that you need to stay grounded and tell the truth, but in an interesting manner.
Of course, of course. Manisha, now say when you're working for a global, when you're heading a global investment banking company like Moelis, they have a certain set of parameters, a certain set of ethics which they entrench in the headquarters. And when you do the things here, as the CEO, do you have to do that, borrow them in addition to yours as well, where you would say that this is suitable to the Indian environment? How do you balance the two? Because that is, when I've talked to a certain CEO, say, of a domestic company, it's easy for him. But when you're talking to a CEO of a global investment banking company, where you have to marry the ideas that they have, because there are certain stricter parameters than what we have. How do you do that? Because when you're bootstrapping the company, as to use the phrase that you used in your profile, how do you do that? And it's something which is very important for our students here, because that is what they need to learn, that how do you do that, especially in a regulatory environment which are different.
I think, Swapnil, as you said, when you are a global firm like ours, down from Australia up to US, we have offices everywhere, the firm is awake 24/7, right? You may be asleep at one point, but the US office may be open or the Australian office may be open. So it's really important that something that you've done in the day doesn't impact the firm in the night when the US office is open, let's say. So I think as far as ethics are concerned, you have to basically get to the lowest common denominator and adhere to it. Doesn't matter if that lowest common denominator on that particular aspect is in Germany or in France or in the US, and that's exactly how we work, which is that you have to be compliant. You just have to be constantly compliant. As you said, in the short term, maybe it impacts the brand, maybe the business and the revenues, but in the long term, it pays off. People want to be aligned. If you're HDFC and you've built your whole business on brand and reputation, you want to be aligned with a brand which is equally good. You don't want to be aligned with a brand which says, in Germany, yesterday Moelis was fined X million dollars, right? Because it impacts HDFC too, that why you aligned with a brand like that. So I think we adhere to the lowest common denominator. It is the right thing to do. I strongly believe in it, and it benefits us enormously because, as I said before, we are only as good as our reputation, right? So if you remember that, and if you remember that this is a long-term game, we want repeat business too, right?
Right.
When we work with someone, we want to align with that client again and again. Our biggest ambassadors are our clients. It's not the league tables or the decks that we we take and the presentations we make, 10 minutes to do those presentations, the clients are bored, right? But when they speak to a friend and the friend says, look, these guys are good, they're ethical, they had our best interests at heart, they spoke their mind. A lot of times on the mergers and acquisitions we do, much like what Manish was saying, at the last minute after having spent 6 months and being pregnant on the transaction, sometimes we find something which we feel is not right for the client. It takes a lot to man up at that point and say, look, let's walk away from this transaction as an advisor. But you do that, you'll get, oddly enough, you'll get a second transaction out of that, or a third, or you'll get a referral business, because the client says, these guys had my best interests at heart. So long as you remember that, I think you'll build a really tangible, resilient brand and a resilient business, and that's what we've done. You asked us what is the reason for a success.
Right, exactly.
I think it's really that. It's the power of the brand and the reputation that comes with that name, which allowed us to compete with banks which were 150 years old, right? A Goldman or a Morgan or a Citi is 150 years old. They have large balance sheets, they're lending, they have touch points with clients at multiple points. We don't have touch points at multiple points. We're only asking for fees for advisory services, right? And you get that only because people believe, it's a trust game and they believe they can trust you.
Manish, now I was speaking to one of the global investment banking CEOs once when I'd met someone in Singapore, and he told me that, Swapnil, the best way to succeed in your vocation, which is law, or say even in mine, in any corporate sphere, is that you have to have the ability to delegate, number one. And at the same time, oversee things. Now, you mentioned that in one of the instances you were not aware of that, and then finally when you came to be aware of that, you said that, sorry, we can't go ahead with this. How do you think that a CEO would be able to do both? That is, to delegate. I have to be a fantastic delegator at that. I need to have the right people so that I can trust them and delegate, and at the same time, the buck stops with me. How do I balance those two things? Because that is where the ethical perspective will come in. I don't want to touch upon artificial intelligence at all in this topic, because that's a separate ballgame altogether. But in terms of human interaction, what do you think, how do you balance the two? Frankly, I did not have the time to ask him at that time that how do you do it, otherwise I would have asked him there itself. But that question has always lingered on in my mind, that how do you do the two?
It's actually relatively simple, Swapnil. I think if you fundamentally, and the people like Keki who's represented that and become mentors in that process, it's an evolution. I think as a younger, whether I was a consultant or an investor, it's actually connected to it's about the humility aspect again. But if you combine humility with smartness, you can actually become redundant yourself from a day-to-day perspective, but be extremely powerful as far as the firm is concerned. Let me explain that. Initially, you all the spotlight. Arey, deal maine kya hai? Today, the 10 monkeys that can do a deal. I mean, not in a negative way. But that's not and I learned this from my boss in Temasek. She was she's probably one of the most powerful people, not only in Singapore, but in the world. But she would not express power. And I'll use an example. The way to play the game, which we learned from her, was when you enter a room, most people in our community want to be the smartest people in the room and be the most expressive and grab the most time. What you learn from them is to be the quiet guy, almost appear to be the dumbest guy in the room. The other person likes it better, and they speak a lot more when they assume you're the dumb guy in the room. You keep extending that thinking and saying, today, no matter who does the deal, if you give credit to the youngest person, or let's say there's a deal leader, but people would know me, my founders and the partners, if you can give the credit of the deal along with, the little thing which comes in the newspapers which you don't remember day after tomorrow, let the deal lead actually own it and say, done by so-and-so. It then leads to ownership. So what you want your employees to be, even though they're technically and economically not, culturally they should be owners and hence ambassadors.
Nurture their own babies, basically.
It actually was beautiful because you can get out of the day, you then become relatively redundant, but critical to keep the culture, the governance, make the final call. But in a time of an emergency, you're not stuck, which happens in our world every week. So you should come in at the time of an emergency to solve a problem that the team is handling rather than being the front for every interaction. And making that mental switch is not easy. It sounds easy. It's huge, but you realize if you play the long game and not the short game, that's the only way to survive.
And Manish, one academic question, since we've got quite a few students today. Do you notice any difference? You were part of the Harvard Alumni Board. The way they taught MBA then and the way they teach MBA now, do you think in the United States there is a difference? As in Georgetown, in my law legal curriculum, I notice a lot of difference. The way they structured things, the way they structured seminars and courses and things like that, and the way they're structuring now. Not to say that those are any better or these were any better, but they're definitely more advanced, taking into the current climes and times. Do you think that there is a significant difference in the way Harvard structures its MBA now? And do you think that Indian MBA colleges should follow suit, or do you think that we are good in what we are doing?
Swapnil, I'm no expert on this at all.
Right.
I would say with my limited knowledge, the core of the HBS system, which I think is also what IIM Ahmedabad does, I'm not sure, is the case system.
Right.
That hasn't changed an iota. And to me, that case system represents a way of thinking. And what does it do? It's very simple. Over the course of 2 years, you had 800 cases thrown on you. You don't remember any, I don't remember any of them. I have a bad memory, but it's taught me how to react to certain situations.
Exactly.
So again, it's like ethics.
Right.
It's built by practice. It's part of you. So then becomes your natural reaction. I don't think that part of the MBA, at least at HBS, has changed the moment. Of course, what is taught is completely different.
Exactly.
And how they did. So for example, and that's because of technology, right? You have much more usage of, our cases were simple. We could take it into a sauna and read the case. Today, it's multimedia,
True.
get pictures. It's much better, right? And there is the whole concept of field trips, which weren't
True.
So the bells and whistles keep changing, but the core thing has not changed at all.
Okay, understood. Jagdeep, I want to ask you this question, then I'll go to Keki. You mentioned a lot about branding, advertising and all that. It's a little tricky question. FSSAI, do you think, or even the ASCII, they're up there to ensure that things don't go awry or people stick to what they say and how they do things? Because this regulatory aspect is also something which I think the students would be interested in knowing, apart from many others who are watching our program today.
See, every industry has some regulatory mechanism. In this case, the two examples that you gave, one is an external regulatory mechanism, that is the FSSAI, whereas the Advertising Standards Council of India, the ASCI, is a self-regulatory one, which is not imposed on you. You decide.
Right.
I think the better way of doing it is in the interest of consumers and in the interest of your own brand perception. It is better that you self-regulate. That the big thing is you do it right when no one is looking. If you're doing it right only when someone is peering over your shoulder and looking, then that is temporary.
That is not ethics.
I give you a small example, one of the clients that we handle. Now this is a table here. I can ask all people sitting here, this table has used some adhesive. What do you think, which brand would have been used? Tell me. See, that's in the mind and heart, that's where brands are built. And it's with faith. It is not advertised, it's not mentioned, the brand is not even seen. But still you know that it's Fevicol.
Because it's branded in your head.
Yes, because all brands are built in the minds and hearts of consumers. They are not built in stores or factories. But to enter the mind and heart, you have to do it in an honest manner, but in an interesting way. So the important thing is the regulatory part, whether it's external or it's internal. I think the better way of doing it is that you should, like self-discipline, self-regulation, you don't want to do it wrong. And at the end of the day, ethics is what? Ethics is right and wrong of human behavior. So if you have decided that I am going to go in the right path, then you don't need regulation from outside.
Correct.
It's going to emerge in any case. But if you have decided that I am going to go the wrong path, and
Then no amount of regulation
my
will-
brand mantra is lead consumers, don't mislead consumers.
Fantastic. Keki, the banking ombudsman that we have for the consumers and, for the people who are bank account holders and things like that, how much do you think an ombudsman is capable of doing, ensuring some ethical practices and things like that? Or is it just, a figurehead? Basically, people who are running the show are the ones who are sitting in, the CEO's position and things like that. Because apparently, along with, when there was an air crash, Tata got into a little bit of a heat. Likewise, there was an FIR against the CEO of HDFC as well. But be that as it may, how much, I don't want to get into that space because that's a different, it doesn't really matter that much as the ombudsman issue, because these figureheads, are they figureheads or are they people who actively do things in the bank?
So I think the ombudsman concept works. It works in banks, it works in insurance companies.
Correct.
And we've seen many cases where, for whatever reason, insurance claim may have got rejected, and the ombudsman says that, no, you have to honor it. So these things do happen. But I want to say two other things. One is that ethics goes much beyond compliance. Compliance is natural. You have to be compliant. There's no way you cannot be compliant. That is absolutely a must. But ethics is much more than compliance.
Correct.
It's voluntary compliance. It's voluntarily doing things which the law does not require to do, simply because it is the right thing to do. I want to add a little bit to what Manish said. Manish talked about brand. Who builds a brand? It's your employees who build a brand. The most important or the most valuable possession a company has is its employees. And if you make your employees happy, if you make your employees feel wanted all the time, they will not do wrong things. We used to have a very unique practice in HDFC where we never hired people directly from the market, experienced people. We only hired people fresh from college. They finished their MBA, they joined us, they worked with us for 18 months. We understood them, they understood us, and then they continued with us, and that's why we never had attrition. So the idea is your employees have to be empowered enough to be able to stand firm on in certain situations. And the way to make people happy is you praise people in public. Like Manish said, if someone has done something good, you announce it to the rest of the people. And if someone has made a mistake, and mistakes will happen in life, you don't tell him publicly. You call him privately and tell him.
Right. Now, Manisha, diversity and gender is one of the aspects that is always there in the corporate world. In as much as you may say, during the Women Empowerment Summit that we just held last month, there was a lot of, still you could see some of those aspects simmer, and especially in the glass ceiling and things like that. People did not talk the women did not talk very openly about it, but I could see that somewhere, there was some sort of a subdued rage in some form that these things are still happening. Now, you yourself had mentioned during one of our seminars earlier, when you were participating, that, people used to say Manish Girotra as opposed to Manisha Girotra. Yeah, so do you still think that in today's day and age still, and not necessarily Moelis and Company, because I think it's, they have a, different perspectives on these things, and, there's affirmative action, and, you have to show this diversity, and you have to show all that. It's the same thing that goes from Harvard and Dartmouth and Yale and Stanford and Georgetown, and it's the same way that it translates to corporations as well. So do you think that it's there, the glass ceiling is still there in some form or the other, when you're dealing with your counterparts in Hong Kong or London or New York or things like that, in terms of promotional elevations and things like that, and within your own fold, as the CEO of Moelis India, I'm sure you have obliterated it to a significant extent, being at the helm of affairs. How do you answer that? I mean, how do you view that? Do you think it's still there?
I think
Women still have to fight?
Sure. So I think if you were to ask this question in the Indian context, I think there is a lot of bias, right? There is, especially in the manufacturing industries, there is huge gender bias because if you go to the shop floor, machines are heavy, people don't want to really change everything around for the women. There are safety issues in women traveling to and fro. So women at times need to take monthly leaves for biological reasons. So all of that builds a huge bias. So I think in India those biases are very strong. People are trying. I mean, I used to be on the board of Ashok Leyland, which I just got off, and Ashok Leyland actually ensured that all of at 3 of their factories, the machines they ordered were lighter and made lower because women are shorter than men, and they actually created whole streams of women on the shop floor for security and safety reasons, so that the families feel safe about sending the women to the factory. So people are trying. I think Tata Motors has done that. A lot of organizations are trying to get women in, but I think at the entry level in financial services especially, I think the gender bias is hugely reversed because I think people are really educating their women, and financial services broadly is somewhere which women have a natural affinity to. But I think as you go senior, there is a bias, and I think that's going away slowly. I still think there's a very long way to go. I think things like what SEBI is doing in terms of mandating one board director, in fact, you and I have discussed this, I would love it if there were 2 directors, creates role models, because what happens is as you come through the funnel, there are no role models for me to look up to and say, look, she did it, so I can do it too, right? So at the mid-level, when the children come or the in-laws or the parents get sick, women fall off. They come in with huge gusto and are probably better workers than most men, and I don't say this frivolously, but I think they fall off because there just aren't enough role models. So I think as we get more people into the funnel, there are a lot of organizations today who are basically, a post-COVID, allowing work from home, getting women back into the workforce, which earlier was a huge stigma, right? If you went away for a 6-month maternity leave, it was a huge stigma when you came back. Or if you took a 2-year sabbatical, it was like you had to join much junior to the organization. All of that we are changing. But I think what needs to change, and I think we've discussed this several times, is the mental biases, right, that we carry from home to work, right? I remember sharing a panel with Keki, and Keki said there is no gender bias at home, and he has 2 women at home, and he's bottom of the food chain.
I've got 3.
You got 3, so yeah. So we need more.
My mom being the most women empowered. So,
that's even better.
Yes, that's better. I'm still the ये नहीं किया तुमने वो नहीं किया तुमने ये नहीं किया ऐसे में
Good.
And still I don't have the temerity to even answer back the way my daughter answers back to me.
You're well trained. So I think that's what needs to change. I think the biases at our homes are not changing fast enough.
Right.
And women are seen as the primary caregiver. Anyway, that's a very long topic, but having said that, I think that we need to do a lot more. I think in organizations like ourselves, which are global, women have pushed through, so there are enough and more examples. With Moelis, the co-founder was a woman. So I think organizations like ourselves have pushed through that bias, but I would like to see a lot more women. I mean, you introduced me to someone who's from JP Morgan who's here. It's nice. We need more of these young girls to push through and carry the flag forward. Right?
Absolutely. One question to Manish, and then we'll just have the concluding thoughts round. Manish, you've been to Davos. Manish Kejriwal has been to Davos recently. Sounds like a great platform. The deals that you could sign in Mumbai, you're signing it in Davos with the same people in India. Sounds absurd to me at times, but other than that, in fact, Harsh Goenka had written a very, very satirical article on that in the Economic Times. Although I don't view it the way he does it, or the way whatever his people do it, but Manish, do you really think, I personally feel from whatever I have read of it, and I have read extensively of it, I read very many magazines, Foreign Affairs and Newsweek and Time and Economist and everything, possibly HBR, etc., whatever. But I feel that it is entirely peppered with geopolitical issues. And ethics in that always tends, it's like your COP meetings, where you talk about development and environment and all that, and all your carbon, ozone, etc. goes down the tube. Do you think that places or fora like Davos can really make a difference in terms of a sense of ethics across the world, which tends to have diminished, not necessarily from the Trumpian era, but I think just generically otherwise as well? Or do you think we really lack statesmen out there?
So I'll get back to that in a second. I just had one comment on your previous question, which was, I actually believe in the actual opposite, which is we now need reservation for men, given the sort of people we have on the women's side in the financial services world.
I
And we will be extinct if more Manishas are swimming around the world. So
We need
that's...
more Manishas.
But on a serious note on that front, I actually think if you think of, there are certain, I mean, it's a longer discussion, keeping reserve seats, whether it's on boards, etc. I fundamentally don't agree with that, but my point is, if you actually believe, a bit like ethics, if you believe in gender, you'll have to live it within. And I don't mean to demean, if I look at the entire production line in the EV space at Bajaj Auto, 100% by women, not because
I know.
we're trying to do, they're better. If you look at Tamil Nadu and look at the iPhone, it's only
it's all
because,
women.
and what did they do to make it happen? It wasn't a stupid rule which said 50% women are needed. They made better dormitories,
Right.
transportation, safety, better food. So you need to change the infrastructure. It's a much deeper problem. Simply having a bloody number which says, ek board member rakho, 50% usko rakho, to me
Makes no
is
sense.
nonsensical. So I just wanted to
Understood.
share that.
Understood.
On your question, Davos, frankly, it's not that relevant. Everyone's read Harsh's thing. There's a much less important person who's written a bit of a rejoinder to that. I will forward that to you.
Sure.
That person also went to Davos and had a bit of a rejoinder. And I say that because it's very easy to throw the baby out of the bathwater.
Absolutely,
It's very
absolutely.
easy to say, you're talking about global warming when you come in your private jets. So it's a misnomer. But actually, if you see what happened and see the other side, and no, ethics, in terms of, and I'm not being defensive, but is ethics a topic of discussion versus geopolitics? Maybe not, in that level of importance.
No, somewhere
Somewhere
you got to view in.
No, of course.
Right, okay,
There's
finish.
so many things,
Please finish.
at least 10% will have ethics as the core, but that's not the focus. But I would say, if you talk, these aren't two different things. To me, the essence of geopolitics is ethical. Today, what you did in Davos, coming into Davos, you thought we were at the brink of war. What we grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s as the global world order with NATO was going to be demolished because if not, sending troops into Greenland,
True.
it was very likelihood Trump would surround that like we did in Cuba in the 60s, and you would essentially that was going to happen. If you saw what happened 3 days later with Mark Carney, talked about the middle powers, he took geopoliticals at a level, and it was purely, what he did was ethical. And he said, this is, if you're not, the line was, if you're not on the menu, if you're not in the room,
Table.
you're on the menu.
Correct, absolutely.
And the whole cause middle parts, and he almost single-handedly, that speech will go down as history, like Martin Luther King or
Exactly.
John Kennedy's JFK's thing on Berlin. But that indirectly put a huge amount of pressure on Trump to Russia. And I see in that article, the rejoinders written by me, and I don't normally write, but I wrote that because I was so annoyed.
No, I loved your article on divorce in Indian Express. In fact, I pointed
What I
that.
said was, success in Davos, in geopolitics or ethics, was not shouting an agreement from the rooftop on a megaphone.
Correct.
It was actually avoiding the damn conflict very quietly. And both sides could declare it a victory rather than ABC.
Absolutely. No, Manish, the only point that I was coming to is that what Donald Trump is lacking today is political heft. When you lack that, that is the time basically what you're imbuing it is they're saying that the man lacks ethics because he just goes and invades Venezuela. He goes and tom-tomming about tariffs, and then the Supreme Court of the United States has come down heavily and tell him that I think you're out of your mind. So the Declaration of Independence, your 250th year anniversary, which is coming up on July 4, is basically going to have to fight a lot of battles to ensure that it stays so. So that is why I tried to ask you that whether in some form, you gave a brilliant example of Mark Carney, saying that, and the way you rejoined to what Harsh said in the Indian Express. So, that was great. Harsh was against Davos, not only that, but he was against budget
Harsh
also.
doesn't mean it serious. Harsh is
I know,
doing it.
he's just doing it for the heck of writing.
Friend. He's a great guy.
Exactly.
And
No,
it's
no,
the right, but people remember that rather than, and then that becomes the South Bombay glitterati talk.
Exactly.
Which is the worrying part. It's not Harsh. It's how we react to it.
True, exactly. And you can just read it as spoof and forget about it, but that's what it is. So anyway, now concluding thoughts, I'll start with Jagdeep and end with Keki. Jagdeep, ethics as part of your everyday life and ethics as part of corporate world, how similar or different are they? Short thoughts, as we have to go to the panel too as well.
Ethics is ethics. It comes out of the Greek word ethos, that is your habits, whether in corporate life or in personal life. I'll just say it in a very simple way. You see, in the morning when I go to teach at General Bajaj, I stay at Powai and I drive down and go to South Bombay. And then there comes Worli and there's the traffic signal at that time. Sometimes I take one driver, sometimes I take the other driver. So one driver looks if there's a cop there. If there's no cop, he breaks the signal. The other driver, irrespective of whether the cop is there or no, he has never broken the signal. Now that is what is one guy is ethical, one guy is not ethical. It's a part of his internal part of it. So whether it's corporate or whether it is personal, ethics is something which is in you. It is inculcated. So either you're ethical or you're not ethical. There's no midway. And therefore, you have to choose a path. And I would say that it's better to choose an ethical path for building a brand because that is long lasting. Simple thing which I would leave as is, these are all the great financial wizards. We also have some financial clients where we build their brands from scratch, like Motilal Oswal, Ramdev ji and everything. But what I would say is that if you build a brand, you are in a position to increase market share.
Correct.
Increase market share, then you increase share market. So there's a very close relationship between
Absolutely.
the two. So it's better that you take the ethical part and
Seriously.
apply ethics both corporate-wise and personal-wise.
Manisha, your thoughts, concluding thoughts.
No, I think your personal life spills into your real life.
Exactly,
You're absolutely
exactly.
right. It's the way you think. I had this
Exactly.
interesting incident over Christmas. We've just moved into a building called Ultimus where Manish has an office too. And it's a pretty tall tower. It's 50 floors or something. And there's a huge queue to scan your bag outside. And I have one bag which has one laptop. That's all it has and my access card. So it really annoys me that if I come 3 times a day, I have to scan the bag thrice. So, my daughter had come over Christmas and I had taken her to see the office since we just moved in. And that was the 4th time I was going in. So I decided not to scan my bag. And my daughter said to me, that's just terrible, right? I mean, what are you trying to promote here? And I was like, oh my God. Firstly, of course, when you have 20-year-olds, they teach
That's
you.
the Princeton talk that's coming.
Yeah, that's the principle. But the point being, that's just right. I mean, why am I trying to do a shortcut just because, I'm in a position of privilege? I just cannot. And since that day, I scan my bag every damn hour if I have to. But the point being, ethics is a lived experience and you cannot compromise because when you start to compromise, it'll just continuously chip away, right? Something else will become okay and then something else will become okay and then, you move that way. So
get into
for
that
me,
rut,
it's a
yes.
24 times 7 lived experience.
Manish, your concluding thoughts. I mean, all-round perspective from, all the, brilliant academic career, corporate career, and, now at the helm of Kedara with geopolitical presence and things like that. You've got a very, very panoramic perspective, if I may say.
Actually, I'll be disappointed. There's nothing. I think Mr. Kapoor said it best. It's ethics is something which to me is black and white. I mean, I think we're all saying the same thing. And some people who choose not to follow the path of strong ethics, you might win in the short term, but in the long term, you're dead. I mean, there's no, in my mind, it's crystal clear on how this, to me, any other path, it's not a two-way path, it's a one-way path. And frankly, there's no second thinking or doubts about the same.
Okay.
I'll just put it this way, that it takes years and years to build a brand. And you cannot build a brand without having the best and the most ethical standards in your company, in the way you behave. So it takes years to build a brand, and one mistake, one small thing can destroy that brand. So you got to be very careful when you build a brand. When you build a brand, you don't build a brand for 1 year or 2 years. You build a brand for the long term. You're thinking of the next decade and the decade after that. Not thinking of maximizing your profits in the next quarter or the quarter after that. So long-term vision, and you cannot have a brand without ethics.
Understood. So I think with that, what Mr. Mistry is trying to tell us is best quoted by Lord George Byron, 1,000 years caste served to form a state and our may lay it in the dust. So I think I'll just ask my people to come and felicitate our panelists one after the other. Payal, Leena, please come up on stage. Sonal, please come up on stage. I can request you to give flowers and the goodie bag. I think it was a very engaging discussion, and Manish, now that you're a part of CFBP, I'm going to have more of you. I've not had enough of you. Let me tell you that. I don't mind. As I always call it, Manish, flowers on a grave is nothing but regret or, gratitude later, posthumous gratitude. So I would rather have it when every one of us is alive. So please, Payal, we'll start with Mr. Whoever's name is written on the bag. Whose name is written on the bag? Yeah, it's, this is Jagdeep, right? Okay. Please. Name लिखा है बैग पे? बैग पे नाम लिखा है? हाँ, this is Manisha. Yeah. Okay. Go up to her.
I know, but yeah.